My name's Lori Winter, and I actually taught in Kansas City, Kansas public schools and was there for about 13 years. I taught at White Church Elementary, and then I was at the district office coordinating literacy for about 5 years. And then I worked at KU on the Kansas Reading Academy, which was a summer experience that you could come for a week and get a binder about this thick and participate in activities, kind of a Monday through Friday thing. You used to get paid. Sometimes you got paid, and hotel rooms. It's starting to become a little bit of a distant memory now because that ended in about 2010 for me. So, and at the end of 2010, I started just doing consulting full time, and so I do a variety of projects. A lot of them are for districts. I work with KSDE at the state level and done some things there. And right now, I have a major project going on in Dodge City, Kansas. So a lot of experiences with ESOL instruction and that sort of thing. But something that seems to continue to come up with me with the whole move towards intervention and RTI or MTSS is a basal or a core reading program. And a lot of people who are trying to implement core and basal reading programs efficiently and effectively, sometimes that can be a little bit of a trick. And the book company comes in and they provide you some information, but it's still hard to navigate all those things, and I'm kind of right there in the middle of it with you trying to figure out how to make this all work. Hence the name of the session today. I'm wondering how to improve instruction. So a little play on words there in terms of what we're doing. So I got to meet all the Junction staff in the last few weeks. We have a staff from Midland Trail. Is that right, Midland Trail? Raise your hand if you're from Midland Trail. And that's a big, huge school. Okay, what are my other elementaries? Turner Elementary?
As big as Turner Elementary.
Turner. Okay. And do we have another elementary? Oak Grove? Oak Grove. Okay. Got a few representatives from there. So thank you so much for giving up whatever you were going to do at your building to come here today. I hope you find what we do useful. We're kind of kicking off the work here at Junction. I came through and walked through all the classrooms to kind of get a sense of the instruction, and on Monday we talked about some strengths and some areas that we really want to beef up here at Junction Elementary. And so this is really our first opportunity to kind of kick off the work that we have to do. I'll point you to the agenda at the bottom. I apologize for the light marker there. But this is really what we hope to accomplish today. We're going to touch on assessment because assessment's critical to know what kids know and what they need to know, right? So we're going to touch on that. We're not going to spend a lot of time there, but we're going to kind of go over where you're at with assessment. And then we're going to go to those stages of reader development and just review what do kids know at each stage of the reading process, because then we want to try and match that to our assessment. What do kids know? What do they need to know? Then we're going to look at wonders and what is core instruction? What does it look like? What should it look like? What should be included in it? How do I fit it in the time frame that I have? All of those big questions about that. Then we're going to look specifically at wonders and really open up the basal and say, what's here? How do I tackle this? How do I do this? And then the last piece are language strategies. At Junction in particular, they have a lot of English language learners, as well as kids who are coming from a low SES background, so low language. If you have kids like that at your school too, then those language strategies will come in beneficial. So while we have wonders, we need to layer our instruction with those language strategies so that we're really attacking and really supporting and building that foundation for language, okay? So let's just get started with, that was my introduction, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with introduction, but hopefully I'll get to talk to all of you as we work through today. I want you to think about what are the best things about being a teacher. This work is so hard. It's so easy to get overwhelmed, to find yourself being negative, but you're here for a reason. You came for a reason. What are the best things about being a teacher? Just take a couple minutes right now and think to yourself, jot down a couple things because you're going to share it. Okay, create a trio or a quad, and the person whose birthday it is closest to today, you get to start first and share what you think is the best part of being a teacher. Just share one thing, then go to your right, and everybody share, and keep going until you run out of things, okay? One thing at a time. Thank you so much. What's something you heard or you want to share? What's the best thing about being a teacher?
Kids, right? Lifelong. Building relationships.
Okay, you get to laugh every day.
Building relationships.
Relationships.
Something that will help them in the future.
Okay.
You can be yourself.
Okay.
Positive difference in someone's life.
I like it when their 2 days are the same.
Keep you hopping. Keep you hopping. It would be boring.
Keeps you on your toes. Get ready. Glory and fame. Just throw it out there.
You know what? Every time I watch award shows like the Golden Globes, the Oscars, I'm like, how many shows do these people need? We need one of these for teachers. I'm really sick of these movie stars who really don't do all. I mean, how hard can that be? It's like, it would be, yeah. Teacher awards. But then, as Linda Holloman said, has anybody been to a Linda Holloman workshop? She used to do BER and she used to do classroom management. That woman was funny. You just laugh and your sides would be hurting by the end. And she said, I'm only funny in a group of teachers, though. So I thought that was a pretty good, like, well, there is something to that. Only teachers can really appreciate that you get, 20 minutes to slam down your lunch and go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. So, all right. So there's a lot of good, positive things that come in teaching, but it is one of the hardest jobs in the world, and it just continually gets harder and harder and harder. So, we have to remember the good things that are going on, right? So just, it didn't stick with me this time. I know. So our meeting norms for today, it's like a surge of power in here. Begin and end on time. We tried our best to begin on time, but I'll make sure we end on time, okay? I can control that. And maybe a little bit early. Participate fully. So there'll be lots of times where you get to stop and talk to your partners, work together, that sort of thing. The hand signal you guys already know because you recognized it before I even told you that. And then phones to silent or vibrate, and if something comes up, just take it to the hallway. I'm perfectly fine with that. Real life happens. And then just managing technology respectfully. If you have iPads, if you have computers, if you'll stick with me, then you will gain the most that you can out of this particular session, okay? Now, one of the things, since I'm talking about technology, let's make sure that everybody has access to the Google Drive. So did everybody get a copy of the link to the resources that I sent to you? Well, this is what I hope to accomplish today. We're going to look at the assessments that you currently use in the district and see, is this a comprehensive plan that's going to be helpful to us? Compare and contrast those stages of reader development. So what do readers need at each particular stage? Analyze what the meaning of core instruction is and determine how to utilize that literacy block effectively. And then we're going to critique the Wonders program. Okay? You're working at a high level because you're going to have to look at the whole thing and say, what is this? What am I supposed to teach? What are the best parts? What are the not so good parts? I'm distracted by all of it. We're going to do that. And then we'll identify 3 ESOL or language strategies that we can utilize. So when I was here with Junction on Monday, just to give everybody else a little bit of background, we talked about there's really lots of things that roll into having good instruction in your classroom. The first one is the environment that you create with your students, right? So what kind of classroom management do you have going on in your classroom? What kind of connection do you have with kids? What kind of feeling do kids have when they're there with you for teaching and learning to go on? When I was teaching and I was teaching 5th grade, I just always remember there's always a kid's name that came up in the teacher's lunchroom every year from the 4th grade teachers. And I always said to myself, if that kid gets placed in my class, I vow not to speak his name during the lunch period. So there was always that setting a goal of like, this kid deserves a new chance again. And so I'm going to be the one to give him there. And I'm going to create that environment where he can be successful or she can be successful so that they have a safe place that they can go. So you create an environment as a teacher. You have all this data. Every district in the world is creating millions of data points. How is it really helping us with instruction? That seems to be the real linchpin that most people are trying to figure out how to make that work, okay? And then development of everything. How do kids develop as readers? How do they develop as writers? How do they develop in mathematics? How do they acquire social studies and science conceptual knowledge and apply that to the world? So we have all of these different developmental pieces that we have to pay attention to. And then we've got materials that the district gives to us. So we could implement the materials as they're written, or we need to pay attention, use the materials according to the development and the data points that we have that take us to the middle, and that really is the art of instruction. You as the teacher are determining the instruction that you are going to provide to your kids each and every day, each and every minute. And there's lots of decisions that go into that. Now thankfully you have some materials and some foundations to start from. Believe it or not, there are districts that don't have basal readers, and you're probably saying to yourself, God, I wish that was us. But you know what, it's really hard, it's almost harder. You have to create everything on your own. You have to create every scope and sequence. There's nothing to work from. So while the basal is difficult, it's also difficult to have nothing as a framework to start with too. So we're really going to kind of focus on that art of instruction today, right? How do we use all of these different key pieces to do that, okay? So we're going to take a few minutes, not a whole bunch, but I want you to think about the assessments that happen in Turner School District, right? Think about the assessments you currently administer to students and record that information on that chart that you have or that box. So there's a set of 2 pieces of paper. You get both of them, okay? We'll use the other one in here in a minute. But take a few minutes to fill out this chart and see if you can record what are all the assessments you're giving at your grade level to your kids. So we just want to know what the assessments are, which students are given the assessment. Is it all of them?
Yes.
What's the purpose? What literacy categories are assessed? And then how do you use that information? Okay, you can work with a partner, but yes, let's focus on just reading. Good question. Well, you didn't seem to have it, a dearth of things to put in there, did you? You had a lot of things that you could write down and put on that actual spreadsheet of assessments. Are you doing plenty of assessments in your district? Okay, we don't need to add anything, right? Well, let's think about it. When you're trying to have a comprehensive assessment program and you're trying to figure out how to give the teachers the best information that they can use for instruction, there's really 4 major areas that you use for assessment. I'm going to ask you to apply this to your paper in just a minute. The first one is simply screening information. Tests like DIBELS and MAP are screeners. Basically what they do is you give that assessment to kids and it spits out kind of, are they at grade level or aren't they? And then sometimes you can drill down. In DIBELS you really can't. 1-minute timing of phonological awareness, that doesn't tell you all the parts and pieces of phonological awareness that you should be paying attention to as a kindergarten, 1st grade teacher. So it simply sorts the kids. It sorts the kids into this basket of I'm probably going to be okay, or you need to look more closely at this kid. Now the map's a little bit different. It kind of can function as a screener and a diagnostic, but mainly a screener of just like where's the kid at overall. And you can drill down and you can drill deep into that as well, but we've kind of determined it as a screener. Then you move into your diagnostic information. The diagnostic assessments are the assessments that should be given to kids that don't pass the screener or were identified as at risk in the screener, okay? So diagnostic assessment is really, that's where you go to get your information. So doing things like IRIs, running records, a spelling inventory from Words Their Way, going deep into things of phonics assessment, a diagnostic phonics assessment, giving the past from Sounds in Action, if some of you are familiar with that. Those are all things that will give you much more information about a particular aspect of literacy and where that kid's at, okay? Then you also have monitoring assessments. So once you know where a kid's at and you provide instruction, you want to see, are they learning, are they growing, are they getting better? The monitoring assessments are assessments that you use to do that. They're usually short, quick. You can use DIBELS as a monitoring piece, okay, to dip back in because that's a short, quick piece. Or you can develop your own monitoring assessments. And then the last piece are kind of those summative assessments. And what's our most famous summative assessment we have in Kansas? From the KITE, the Kansas Assessment Program. Those assessments that we give at the end of the school year, that could be that way as well. I think you could put MAP there too, because it kind of says collectively, how did the kid do at the beginning, how did the kid do at the end, okay? So if you're trying to have a good comprehensive assessment system, you want to make sure and have all of these pieces in place. Now what I see a lot of times in districts is they do a lot of screening and they do a lot of monitoring, but there's not very much diagnostic. And that's where it's real tough to target your instruction if you don't know exactly where that kid's at on knowing, can he break words into individual phonemes? Does he know vowel diagrams? Can he break down multisyllabic words? If I don't know that information, then when I teach, I'm kind of teaching to the bullseye, but I don't know where it's going to hit. Could hit way outside, could hit in the middle, could hit in between those 2 points, right? So go back to the list that you have and see if you can identify what kind of assessment you have. Is it a screener? Is it a diagnostic? Is it a monitoring piece? Or is it summative? What do you have on your list? Are there any holes in your assessment system? Anybody identify any holes? Anything that's missing?
I feel that we do a lot of screening and summative, but in kindergarten, not a lot of diagnostic.
Okay.
Monitoring it.
Okay. So maybe needing more here. Other observations?
Yes.
Can you tell me more about summative? So what are the things that we really want to do, like when it comes to first grade? What would be an appropriate summative assessment?
Like what would be their reading level at the end of the year compared to last year?
It could be grammar, math,
I mean, it could be, a summative assessment is like the Kansas reading assessment. It's something that's given that says it evaluates a kid's performance for that entire year. So it's something that you do there.
Is it for the entire year or like?
Could be the unit, could be summative, and like we've been doing a unit on the American Revolution. And so how did the kids do in totality in that whole unit?
I think a lot of things that we do, it depends on how you choose to delve into the test, whether it can be any, for the KITE, you can play for the ACT Aspire, you can get deep into that, I guess, but do you, or the math, are you actually going to flex on and do something with it, right? Yeah.
Or in the upper grades, your areas of difficulty and success
What?
factor. That's your areas of difficulty and success
Oh,
factor
right.
is a diagnostic.
Yes.
It tells me exactly where kids are
Yes, sure does.
struggling.
So to finish this little piece of paper, go by and put a star by the ones you use the most to help inform you about students and student performance. Put a star next to the one that you use the most. And it's okay if you're like, I don't have anywhere I can put a star. Put a star next to the assessments you use the most to determine what kids know. So assessment is always an ongoing battle. You have it, it's there, it seems to kind of keep growing where you have to always reevaluate. And I think here in Turner, there was some discussion about pulling together teams of teachers from different buildings to bring you together to talk about assessments, and that the teachers and that you all have input about the assessments that are kind of on that list. I'm kind of looking at Joy like, am I kind of on track?
Our mapping.
In the past, you've brought together teachers who like kind of looked at those, and that's fantastic that you guys have a voice in the assessments that are there. But part of that voice is that you have to be knowledgeable about what it is that you want and what should be there, right? So when you're looking at your school assessments, do they accomplish what we want them to accomplish? Okay, we have a whole list of them, and as you come back together and you always reevaluate what assessments we're giving, those are the questions you're asking, right? Are we using too many screeners? We don't have enough diagnostics. Are we all we're doing is diagnostic? All we're doing is testing kids, and so I don't have any time to teach. Thinking about that. Are there tests we should add? Are there tests we should abandon? Okay. The great thing I think in the world today is that No Child Left Behind is now, the ESEA is reauthorized, and that everything is going to change in terms of this whole noose around our neck with assessments. That Congress and the people in Washington are saying there needs to be less government or federal government control of schools and assessments, and that the states will have more decision making. And we have a new state commissioner who is very much in favor of not having everything be driven by those accountability assessments. He wants to kind of think bigger, broader, that sort of thing. So, you have to kind of look at what's going on in the world around, and we got all these assessments because of the parameters of No Child Left Behind. And they really forced us into using some of these things. So now maybe we'll have a little more breathing room to say, how is all of this going to work? The most important thing is that we know what our kids need. That's what we need assessments for, right? Okay, so that brings us to conclusion about assessments. But I've stirred up some thinking here about what is it that I'm actually getting from the assessments that I'm using. Now let's move into those stages of reader development. This whole thought that kids, as they become readers, move through these different stages has been around for a long time. Okay? Jean Chall, in her book, really talked about the stages of reader development and how kids grow and change and evolve over time. Fountas and Pinnell talk about the stages of reader development. So did Thomas Gunning. There are a lot of people and there's a lot of literature out there about how do readers develop. What do they know first, then what, then what, then what. So kids move through these stages all the time as they're learning to read. So let's dig just a little bit deeper. When we think about the first stage of reader development, think about preschool, think about kindergarten, think about first grade. There's really three main categories that kids need to acquire information in reading. They need to understand concepts about print. They need to continue to grow and learn about language. And they need to understand what is the sound-letter correspondence, alphabet, how do I use letters and sounds to write. All of those things are really the foundation with which we build and start kids in terms of literacy. So I'm going to ask you to think about, this is a pie or a pizza, how would you divide that? How much time should a teacher spend on concepts about print with emergent readers? How much time should they spend teaching sound letter correspondence? How much time should they spend with language development? Just kind of draw an imaginary line down that circle and think about it. You can whisper to your neighbor and see what they think. How many people think concepts about print is the biggest piece of the pie?
For what grade?
What?
Are you talking about a particular grade? Are we looking at
Emergent readers.
kindergarten?
I can have emergent readers, yeah, in 8th grade. If you have English language learners, you might have an emergent reader who's a 5th grader because they're an emergent reader in English. Okay. How many people think sound letter correspondence would be the biggest piece of the pie? How many people think language? A lot of people think language. You're right on track. Language is a very big piece of the pie. And notice I have squiggly lines because it can vary depending on the student. You come in with kids who have a lot of language, they're in your face immediately, aren't they? And it's like, and it's like, whoa, this kid has a lot of language. And then you've got another kid who comes in that won't even talk to you and can't form a sentence, all right?
But yet that's something you can't test, so we spend our time on it.
You can test language.
Yeah, I agree.
There are language assessments. Speech pathologists do test language all the time. It's not something we typically think about. We jump right to literacy as teachers. But language is certainly an area that we can explore more about where are our kids. Sound letter correspondence, we do have to teach the alphabet and how letters work, and there's specific, explicit instruction that goes into that, so that's a pretty big piece of the pie. Concepts about print, we're just teaching kids how books work. How do we hold them? How do we turn the pages? Where do we start reading? What's punctuation? But those are all things that are pretty easy to teach during a shared reading time or other times throughout the day, read alouds, things like that. So it's not as big a piece of the pie. But in language, we're going to be spending a lot of time there. Now, if you go into that Google Drive, I have some additional pieces that I want you to look at, so let me find it for you. It's called the ESL Reader Development Circles. So if you could pull that up. My not straight lines can drive some people crazy because they want to have straight lines and they want everything to be exact. All right. But let's kind of look at what's all in this language piece. If you can't find it, you can just kind of look up here. Vocabulary, huge. We need to expand vocabulary with kids always, every grade level, right? But particularly emergent readers. Syntax, getting kids to expand their language and talk in longer and more complex sentences. Not just, I went home. I went home and told my mom that I needed to go back to school. Having that language and expanding that language and getting more oral language going. Having some fluency in using that language. Lots of talking in small groups, lots of partner shared, lots of ways that kids are having to use that language, okay, in their social interactions. And then as we move into academics, stories. Story structure, having kids do retellings using academic language. We've heard that term a lot with Common Core, but academic language around what are the key elements in narrative text. What are some simple descriptions of objects and events? That helps lead us into informational text. If kids can describe certain information, they'll get better at it. And then do they understand that receptive language? Do they understand what other kids are saying to them and developing that listening comprehension? So this is the whole area with emergent readers that we're really working on in language, and we're using books and we're using reading and writing and we're doing all of those things to help advance kids' language. Now, if we're not sure, thought I fixed it. If we're not sure what to do with that, there are assessments that will give you information about where kids' language levels are. When we look at word learning, or what was sound symbol correspondence on that particular piece of the pie, this is what we're teaching emergent readers. Phonological awareness, right? They have to get good, particularly at the phoneme level with segmenting and blending. How the alphabet and sounds correspond. Can they write? Or can they decode words, easy words, like at, in, things like that? Easy sight words, kind of the first 10 or 20 sight words to kind of get them up and going as readers. Can they segment and blend vowel consonant, like the word at, or consonant vowel consonant words like cat? That's what we're trying to get emergent readers to do in this particular aspect of that stage. And then some other word recognition strategies. What strategies can they use when they go into read text? those early texts, those real simple ones. I like yellow, I like red, I like blue, I like green. Trying to get them along those that path. And then concepts about print is another small area. So think about, do you have any emergent readers in your class? Can you put a name to this stage? You might not. You teach 5th grade, you might not have any emergent readers. If you teach kindergarten and 1st and 2nd, you have an emergent reader. If you have a KELPA level 1 in your classroom, you have an emergent reader in English. Depending on what their reading level might be in their native language, that would make a difference. Okay? Now, this typically goes up through level C. You guys use letter levels, right? Most people are moving to letter levels completely. But kids who are reading through level C typically are here. And I'm going to keep saying typically, because you know what? Kids can move in and out of these stages. Sometimes they're kind of like emergent readers. Sometimes they're kind of like early readers. So, but knowing what's taught in each developmental stage is important when you go to make those decisions about how to instruct kids there. Okay? All right, let's keep going. So as kids start to move in the next 3 stages of reader development, there starts to emerge these really what we would call reading components that are, okay, so do these look familiar? That kids, we have to teach kids word learning. We have to make sure that we're still maybe talking about phonological awareness a bit, but phonics, word recognition, spelling, okay, sight words. Comprehension is the second main category that we're going to teach in this stage of reader development. Vocabulary and language. So comprehension at the word level is vocabulary. If kids don't know what the vocabulary is, their comprehension can go down, which is why we teach vocabulary, right? Comprehension at the phrase level, so getting bigger. If they don't know what that phrase means, think of idioms for ESOL kids. If they don't know what the idiom is, I don't understand the text, okay? And then sentence, paragraph, page, whole text. So comprehension is a complex beast that we're always working on. And then fluency, okay? So as we move into this stage of early readers, now we're thinking about word learning, comprehension, and fluency. Talk to your neighbor. How would you divide this piece of the pie now? They're an early reader, so emergent, and now we're moving into early. What are they doing?
Did you guys figure it out? Okay, so if emergent readers kind of typically leave off about a level C, and then they start to move into early readers, which one of these parts do you think is the biggest? Word learning, comprehension, or fluency? Heard word learning? Anybody else? Okay, you're on. Comprehension's still a big piece. Word learning is the most important though. We have a lot of phonics to teach. We have to teach kids how to break down. If emergent readers are doing vowel consonant and consonant vowel consonant words, those are very short words. Now in the early stages, I have a whole bunch of phonics to teach. I have to teach blends, I have to teach digraphs, I have to teach vowel digraphs, I have to teach multisyllabic words, because once kids get into level Ds and higher, they're encountering multisyllabic words, compound words, endings. We have to address all of those things. So we are teaching a lot of phonics for early readers, okay? But we're not gonna ignore comprehension. We're not just reading the words, right? We're really attending to, what does this whole text mean? What is this book all about? Is it a narrative? Is it an informational text? What information should I get from it because of that, right? So comprehension is a big piece. Fluency is a small piece of the pie right now. Really, fluency at this point is how fluent are they at sight words, okay? Because they have to know sight words. My first grade teacher, yeah, that's right. You gotta have sight words and you gotta know them quickly to do that. My son's in 3rd grade. We don't ever talk about sight words because he's not an early reader anymore, okay? So, but, well, I didn't even, 2nd grade, we attended to it a little bit in 2nd grade. So that's where the development comes in, and I want you to be thinking about your Wonders textbook that you have and what grade level you teach. What's written on the side in those units of study? And think about where your students are, okay? Because they didn't write it for your kids in your classroom. They wrote it to sell all over the United States and all over the world. So they're trying to put everything in there that anybody might need. And I think that's the part that makes it really tricky, which is why development is so important. Let's go back into the Google Drive and let's look specifically at what you teach if you have early readers. Now that it's not so big, hopefully, for you. Got that problem solved. Okay, so here's what we're teaching. A lot of things that I just said. That's different from the emergent reader, isn't it? So now I know developmentally what I need to be teaching my kid. Segmenting and blending chunks or phonograms so that they can use those analogies to decode bigger words. My comprehension, vocabulary, the phrase, the sentence, the text, monitoring. Is that the right word? Is that the word that the writer wrote? You have to read what's there. Monitoring is really important. If any of you do running records, IRIs, or benchmark assessments, that's what kills kids if they don't go fix their mistakes, right? That's why they can't get to the next level. They can't get to the next IRI. You have to teach them how to do that. You have to encourage it. You teach it whole group. You encourage it during small group time, and you hold them accountable for it. I love the way Jennifer self-corrected on page 5. Everybody go back to page 5. Jennifer, tell us how you did that. How did you know that wasn't the right word, and what did you do to figure it out? That's how you really get kids to start to monitor. Teaching them to be strategic. And I'll talk in a little bit about some strategy charts that I've used in the past, and I think you have access to some here in the district as well. Focusing on inference and making links. How did you know that? Because now as the text will become a little more sophisticated, kids will have to make some inferences as they're reading books to themselves. And that story structure, continuing to evolve that story structure piece. So narratives are easier for kids at these levels to learn to read and to understand because they have real human experiences that they can relate to. Informational text is harder for them because if I don't know anything about volcanoes, it's going to be a lot harder for me to read that text on my own as an early reader. It's not that we don't give that to them. We give them those experiences doing that. But story structure is really where we can kind of focus with these early grades. And then the 3 parts of fluency, pace and rate, smoothness, and prosody. Those 3 key pieces that go into fluency. But again, it's a smaller piece. That might be something that I could do a poem a week. And I could practice my fluency that way. Or what I like to do a lot with early readers is I like to have them do familiar rereads. So when we're doing that transition time and kids are coming back to small group, my small group knows that while I'm getting everybody settled, they're supposed to get back there to that table and they're supposed to start pulling books from the box that they've read before, and they should be reading until I come sit down at the table. Okay? So that familiar reread time helps to build fluency so that you can get that going from the beginning. Now notice that I kind of inserted over the top language. If you have low language kids, if you have second language kids, you're going to have to do more here, be more explicit about some of those items, okay? Because they don't know that. In Spanish, they only have 5 vowels, right? We've got 1 million. I mean, it feels like 1 million. They're like, what is this? Why? We have to explain those differences to the kids because that's not something they typically encounter. And then the same thing with the comprehension. How do we help with that vocabulary piece to help build that? Okay. All right, let's go back to the 3rd stage of reader development, and I'm sure you're already thinking, as we move into the transitional reader, how is that going to be divided? So think about, at the bottom of that, does it say I or something, or H? Is that exit level for that level of early readers? I. And it may be more, maybe less, depending on the skill set of the kids. So now we're moving into transitional readers. So my intermediate teachers really should be kicking in here, like, what's going on? What am I teaching? What's the biggest section? Comprehension. Oh, wrong button. Comprehension is the biggest section with transitional readers. They have that word learning kind of under control. I got some issues here. Comprehension is the biggest. Word learning and fluency. Fluency is becoming a bigger piece. Why? Why does fluency matter? Feeds into comprehension. Okay. I once heard a great speaker, her name was Barbara Swaby, and she talked about fluency and that your brain can hold about 8 bytes of information at a time. So think about a reader who reads 8 words and how their comprehension would be, and think about a struggling reader who his 8 bytes of information are 2 words, because he's having to slow down and like really figure out what each individual word is. All of a sudden my comprehension's going down. So you want to attend to fluency here and make sure that kids are using fluency to feed into comprehension. And this is really the area that has just been overused because of this whole attention to how fast you can do things on assessments tended to influence the teaching. We don't really care about how fast you can read the pace and rate. You have to use the appropriate fluency to understand. When I'm reading a tax document, you better believe I got slow fluency. Okay, because I'm like, what does that mean again? I don't know what's going on. If it's a hard text for kids, you might slow down to read it. That's good. Because you don't want to just coach kids to be fast at everything. I have a friend whose daughter is in a school district close by here, but not here. And fluency is a big deal in their district. Her daughter would cry. I have to read faster. I'm not reading fast enough. I'm going to get sent to intervention if I can't read fast enough. What are we doing to fluency? Let's not do that. That doesn't feel good. Okay? It feeds into comprehension. That's the goal of it. And that's what we should always be asking kids, right? What's going on? Are we understanding that? Okay, that's good. Or how do we communicate our understanding of this text to other people by using fluency? How can we read? Doing readers' theaters. How do we do that? Okay? You go into your the Google Drive again and look at transitional readers. Let's see how they change. See how the components change. Okay? If the kid's a transitional reader, he's got that automaticity of sight words already. Sight words aren't really something we're working on. Now, if I teach 5th grade, do I have a kid who might still need sight words? Yeah, because they're probably an early reader. Okay? So this isn't grade level specific. It's not reading level specific. It's what aspects match most closely to where kids' needs are instructionally, okay? Chunking and multisyllabic words and vocabulary as we move into the comprehension piece. Notice primarily silent reading. So kids are off reading by themselves. When they come back to the table with me, what do they need me for? I don't really need to listen to them read. Nobody needs to. They can go back and do work on their own and then come up and meet with me. And then I'm going to probably help more with the comprehension side, right? I don't need to listen to them read sometimes. I mean, every once in a while. But go back to your seat. You're doing this, you're completing that. Then when you come back to me, then I'm going to be working on this particular piece. Okay? So a balance of narrative and informational text during that instructional time. Because kids are going to be encountering a lot of that. My son does not really like narrative. He likes informational text. It's much more interesting to him. So having that balance helps address that he needs exposure to narrative, but he's still going to get some of that informational text that he loves anyway. Okay? Now, self-extending readers, that's easy. I mean, that's you and me, right? We can go and we can attack most words, we can attack most text, and we can get information from it, except if you have to put something together in your house. I don't really know how he writes those directions, but you just figure it out without them, right? So I don't really get too much into the self-extending stage of reader development because we have so much work to do in the ones prior to that. So as you think about the stages of reader development, you have to continually be changing and altering your instruction based on what your assessment data tells you and what you know about development. Like Johnny is kind of in here, this is what his assessment tells me, this is the stage of reader development he's in. Now where does that match and how does that match the materials that I have, right? So that's the trick. All right, so I'm gonna bring you back to a time where you haven't been for a really long time, okay? The other piece of paper that you got has a series of photos with frogs on it. I'm going to take you back to what it's like to learn to read again. Right? Okay? So, this is a story about two frogs. Your job is to figure out what those little black things at the bottom say. Okay? You can work together. What I'm going to do it this way. I want you to try on your own for 2 minutes by yourself. And while you do this activity, I want you to be thinking about two things. One, how are you feeling? Two, what strategies are you using to figure out those little black things? How are you feeling? Strategies. Okay, no talking right now. 2 minutes so you can feel it. Jot down at the top of your paper, how are you feeling? And do you have any strategies? And then you can work with some partners. I'll give you about 10 minutes to see how far you can get. How are you feeling? Excited. How are you feeling in the beginning? Overwhelmed, frustrated, what else? Discouraged, annoyed, aggravated, like why do I have to do this? This is silly. What's going on? That's how all of your immersion and early readers feel in the beginning. When you put those books in front of them, they have no idea what's going on. What is this? What is this? Right? So, what did you do? What strategies did you use? I'm going to kind of record them up here as you say them, but how did you figure this text out?
Starting with picture clues.
Pictures, okay.
For the same word over and over. Yeah.
What else? Strategies.
And then once I found the word, I like to see what symbol could possibly mean.
If I got out one and it was a multiple letter word, and with two of those letters, I
Yeah.
would figure it out.
Okay, how'd you figure that out? It had some letters, but not others. How'd you figure that out? So let's say you had the C and the M. and it was a 4-letter word. How'd you figure out the O and the E?
We looked at other words.
Look for what?
Look at other words that had that letter in it.
It had that
New.
vowel.
Okay.
We
Then
looked,
what?
It had to have a vowel.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
They mentioned context.
we also had prior knowledge.
The context is
We looked for the common word under every picture because we knew that had to be purse or bag.
Okay.
Because
hang
that's
on.
in every picture.
Okay, Joy. Say it again.
We looked for the common word under every picture that had the purse in it, and we knew it had to be purse or bag, and so we determined that word first, and then we went from there, like decoding it.
Okay. Nice. Another strategy.
knowing knowledge of common sense structure.
Okay.
You had to know that to know what we did.
And I looked for one-letter words first. That's what I did.
Okay. And what would those typically be?
I or A.
I think more than anything, determination you needed.
That's right. That's what's
Yeah, exactly. The ability to be
So I'm not going to get that right. Okay. I still don't have a good. What other strategies?
How about listening to the people around?
Dropping. Copying.
All right. This seems like a good place to take a break. Why don't we take a break of about 10 minutes? Okay, wow, look at you guys. Energized. You all can read frog now. You have some strategies. I know that we're kind of reviewing some things about reader development that maybe, a lot of you have been aware of for a long time, but it's good to kind of bring it back up because it's going to influence the choices you make when you get to the basal. So we have to be all on the same page in terms of really thinking about it. So I'm going to dip back in, but I'm going to go pretty quickly because I know you guys have probably had access to that, to some information on language viewing systems prior to our work here. But I really wanted you to do the frog activity again to take you back to what it's like to not know how to read, and how hard it is, and how explicit you have to be in your teaching of kids about reading, right? So if we were to take these reading strategies that you utilized, and we looked at the language cueing systems, there are really 3 cueing systems that kids use, that all people use simultaneously when you're reading. One is the phonological system, one is the syntactic system, and the other is the semantic system, right? So let's look at each one individually. The phonological or the sound letter system, also the graphophonic system, is really just the letters and sounds in words. You were using those with Freddie the Frog, or Francis the Frog, right? You were actually going in and you were looking at what was the same letter, what was the same symbol, and that must be that letter, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that. Kids have to have deep knowledge of letters and letter sounds in order to be good at it, and as they move through those stages of reader development, they need to have chunks, and they need to have syllables, and they need to know how syllables work. All of those come from the visual or the graphophonic system. So the visual system, that B is important because when you get to running records and informal reading inventories, they ask you, does the kid use the visual system when he's reading? And that can really inform our instruction. The second system is that syntactic structure, or the syntax of speech. Syntax of sentence, syntax of English. You used it when you said, well, we figured out what 2 of the words were, and then we said what would make sense to go in that, what would make it a sentence, right? That's what you did on Francis the Frog, and that's what kids are doing. Sometimes they're running over those words and then saying, oh gosh, what word would make sense in that particular sentence? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? And what do we already know that we can just go to our head and use that. We don't have to decode or use the visual system for everything, because sometimes it doesn't work, right? Because the letters are wacky. And so, well, that rule worked before, but now it doesn't. So syntax. And then the semantic or the meaning system. Kids are creating and should be creating meaning in their heads all the time as they're reading. So they're activating their prior knowledge. They're creating pictures in their heads as they're reading. They're thinking, does this make sense? Is this story all fitting together? That doesn't make any sense about a seal, what I just read. That must not be the right kind of word. So maybe I need to go back and I need to look at it again. So the S for, that should be M for meaning, is the meaning. I did a little bad copy and paste there, okay? So kids are using all of these cue systems simultaneously, right? We've got the semantic or the meaning system. We've got the syntactic or the structure system. And we've got the graphophonic or the visual system. And we want kids in the middle, right here, that's where they construct meaning. Sometimes they can go a little bit off the trail or off the train tracks, and they'll over-focus on one. Like sometimes kids are reading and they just read the meaning and they don't pay attention to what those words are, right? I don't even look at the letters. It's like, well, I know it's a bag. I don't know if it's a bag or a purse, it's just a bag. I'm just gonna keep reading. The problem is that when they are tested and when they're scored on something, it won't allow them to continue to advance if they're not actually then using the visual system to cross-check it. I know it's a bag or a purse, it starts with P, it must be purse. So now I'm using both of them, right? And then the syntax structure. So using all three of those simultaneously is what you are coaching for in your whole group lessons and in your small group lessons, right? So for a really long time, we've used a strategy, I've used a strategy chart with kids because it's a nice scaffold to the cueing systems, okay? So if we were to look at, this is one that I actually created for Dodge City, but there's lots of strategy charts, and I know Christy said that they had one here. I don't know if your district has a strategy chart that you use for beginning readers, but how do you get them to read? If you can coach for cueing systems, look at the picture. What cueing system does that address? Meaning, visual, or structure? Okay. Meaning. The visual is what? It's confusing. Visual doesn't mean you see the pictures. Visual means you see the letters. Letters, right? So this is the meaning cueing system. Get your mouth ready to say a letter or a sound. The visual system, because I'm getting ready to use letters and sounds. Put the sound, say the sounds, and put them together. Okay, slide them together. The visual system, we're looking at letters. Look for chunks, visual. Try different vowel sounds, visual. Okay, think about, does it make sense? The meaning system. Okay, skip the word and then come back. Structure. Think about what word would make sense in that sentence. So have them use the structure sentence and self-correct. Now this is for very beginning readers because I don't want my early and transitional readers pointing to words anymore. I want them tracking with their eyes, okay? So we created a second version that took off some of the things because this kids move through these different stages of reader development. You need different kind of strategies that you're attacking. So we needed more fluency and we needed more vocabulary. So you'll see those represented on here. And then also, I put in your Google Drive a comprehension strategy chart. So as we really move into that transitional stage of reader development, now I'm focused on comprehension strategies the majority of the time, right? So these are kind of for my early and emergent readers, and then my transitional readers, I'm going to be spending using that comprehension strategy chart, and we're going to be focused mostly on that comprehension part, vocabulary, that sort of thing. So strategy charts are a great way to scaffold kids, particularly ESL and low language kids need a support system when you go away. What am I supposed to do? How do I do that? You explicitly teach these strategies to kids and you encourage the use of them at your small group reading instruction, then kids will start to transfer and they will start to apply it. So instead of me being at the small group, the kid comes to a word they don't know, Teacher supplies the word for them, which please never do that, because that just trains them that you'll give it to them. They don't have to persevere, okay? I only gave you a few hints after you already had them, right? You got the frog, and then somebody gave you Francis. I didn't tell you anything else. And you figured out how to read the whole Francis the Frog, okay? I would cue to strategies. What could you do to figure that word out? I don't know. Look at the chart. We'll pick one of the strategies to try, okay? That's scaffolding. We do it together, okay? Kids are doing it, and I'm helping support them. So the connection between the strategy chart and really teaching kids to use those 3 cueing systems is very strong. So if you're teaching using a strategy chart, you're really encouraging all of those cueing systems to occur simultaneously, okay? So when you're trying to use reader development and instruction, there's several keys that you want to use assessment to figure out where kids are at, right? Then for instruction, we want to go back and we want to look at that stage of reader development and say, kind of, what do I teach in word learning again, and comprehension and fluency, and how do I match that to that particular kid? And then continually revisit where they're at, so that kids aren't just kind of stuck in that same place all the time, which many teachers do all of the time, and I'm sure you do too. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to kind of dip into some benchmark assessments, okay? Since I didn't have access, we didn't have enough time for me to get access to, how many people use the benchmark system from Wonders? Oh, we do. Okay. Okay, so Treasures was your last Basil and you're using that, okay? So a few people are using a benchmarking system. Benchmarking system is simply a series of graded passages, graded meaning graded in word difficulty, so that you can kind of see where kids might have control and then where it drops off, where they can't read those particular aspects of it. So in the Google Drive, you'll see there are 3 sets of guided reading, or 3 sets of benchmark assessments. One is a 5th grade student, and that's what I'm going to show you here in a minute. The other 2 are 1st grade, but they're level C and level E or F, I think. So pick maybe the one that is closest to what you teach, so that you can kind of look at that. But I wanted to kind of model for you a little bit how you can use these benchmark assessments to really then go back and match your instruction to that reader development. So let me get out of this and get it up here for you to see. Okay. So this is what you're looking for. So this student is a 5th grader, and this is actually the Next Steps reading assessment kit from Scholastic that this Dodge City uses. 5th grader, and we're starting at a level N, because that's kind of where he's been at. So we're trying to figure out where exactly his instructional reading level was. So in this particular text, what the benchmark assessment, what they ask you to do is the kids read from an N, they have just one card. So it's not a whole book, it's just a card. So they read that, teacher marks the errors that the kids make. There's a fluency rubric down here at the bottom where they score the kids on their fluency, okay? And then page 2, let's go to that. They can assess the comprehension with retelling comprehension questions. And then down here at the bottom, they can find out if it's a kid's instructional, independent, or frustrational. So Wonders and Wonders and Treasures both have benchmark assessments with them that would be similar to this, and that would have the same thing. But let's just see if we can use this assessment data to kind of figure out where this kid is. What stage of reader development would you kind of guess if he's an N? Transitional, or N is transitional. What's the one before that? Early. So somewhere in those 2, let's see if we can see like evidence of what what this kid's doing, okay? Okay, so it reads, Matt's sister Anna had a pet spider named Ellen. It was a trapdoor spider that Anna found in the yard. The spider lived in a grass jar on Anna's window sill. See that? Like the animal seal. It was dark brown and about the size of a walnut. It was friendly and pretty harmless. So when she said grass for glass, was that an error? Yes. Okay, it's not the word that's there. Window seal for window sill. How would you count that?
I don't know, it depends on where you are in the country. I mean, as far as how you say it and how you articulate.
Okay.
And if
he's from Dodge City, he said it right.
Or Oklahoma.
So this is a little bit of a judgment call. If you're real conservative, you might say no, it's going to be an error. If you're like dialect, I'm going to leave it not as an error. Okay? I think it's fine as it is. I mean, I think it's just the difference between the it and the eel, right, part. So, you know, I'm probably more concerned, does he know what it means than that. Okay, so why did he say grass for glass? Was it a meaning? Did he use meaning here? No. Because that doesn't make sense to say that. Did he use structure? The spider lived in a grass jar. No, that doesn't make sense. Did he use visual cues?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. He did because grass and glass look real close. The letters are very similar, right? Okay. Now Matt wasn't scared of many things. He wasn't afraid of thunderstorms. He didn't mind the dark. He even thought snacks were pretty cool. But there was one thing he was totally afraid of: spiders. So snacks for snakes, is that an error?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think? Did he use meaning?
no,
Okay. So no meaning, no structure. He thought snacks were pretty cool. Yeah, but meaning-wise, it's like that's not really what we're talking about, not food. Okay. How about afraid for frightened? Is that an error? Okay. And then did he use meaning? Yeah, that means the same thing. Afraid and frightened, he has that. Did he use structure?
Over the structure.
Yeah, because afraid and frightened are both, are they adverbs? Or, yeah, so did he use visual? No. Okay. He was terrified of big spiders. He was terrified of little spiders. He was terrified of teeny tiny spiders. See that little SC? Self-correct. Okay. So we have an omission. That's an error. And tiny is an error. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Oh boy, my eraser's a little bit. Fritz. Okay, so we'll put it there. All right, so how about, why did he make the error? He was terrified of teeny tiny. He was following what? Was he using meaning?
Yes.
It makes sense to say that. He was terrified. Structure makes sense. Does it visually match? No. Okay. All right, so what do we have here? How many errors? 4 and 1 self-correct. Well, that self-correction rate's easy to find. He makes a self-correction 1 in every 4 errors. That's within the acceptable range, 1 to 6. Anything outside of 1 to 6 is not acceptable. Okay. How about fluency? He's a 2. Moderately slow reading in 2 or 3 word phrases, some expressions. It's kind of okay. Kind of slow. Okay. I'm going to skip these 2. All right, let's go to the comprehension. So I usually like people to write down exactly what the kid says. This teacher just said it was a decent retelling and scored it as a 3. Okay, which a 3 was retells important story elements, the characters, the problems. Needs information in sequential order. So we've got some work to do here. He did all of the questions correct except the first one, where he just kind of gave a little bit about what does it mean to coax. He said move them. So he got a half a point there. So the question score and the retelling score gave me a comprehension score, and then when I go down here, he had 97% accuracy rate on the front page. Okay. He was a 7 for comprehension, and he had a fluency rating of 2, which put him in this box here, which means he's in his instructional level still. Now, don't forget to keep going, because we don't know if he can read the O or not, okay? So when we got to O, he was able to read it. So let's see how he did here. Why don't you work with a partner and see if you can do these 3 errors with the partner, okay? Did he use meaning or structure? No. That doesn't even make sense. Imagine for imagine. Okay. They're very crafty, these 5th graders. And how did they come up with words that look very similar? I mean, well, it's not really a word, but they come up with something that looks really close to it. It's just bizarre. Astronauts for astronauts. All right. So he's got 3 errors. That's not really that bad, right? And his fluency's a 2. I still have a lot of questions about the fluency. It's so slow. Do you think it might impact his comprehension?
Yeah.
But we were discussing like ELL kids have a tendency, I've noticed, to be much slower and methodical about it because I think they're trying to understand it. So
Okay.
they have a tendency to slow down, but a lot of times their comprehension's relative.
So it could impact that.
Although this kid comprehension.
All right. When we look at the comprehension, he had a really hard time with vocabulary. What's a trench? Very typical. The knowledge development or the key detail. He kind of got some stuff about an inference. He was able to analyze relationships here. How's the ocean similar to Mars? And then the last one, nothing. He couldn't evaluate. So his comprehension really dropped off. So when we come down here, his comprehension score, he ends up at the frustrational level, right? So this kid is a 5th grader who's at an N, and we've got to figure out what we're going to do with him. So when we think about our circles, word learning, comprehension, fluency, be thinking about our circles and where we're going to go. I want to give you another piece of information. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the QPS, the Quick Phonics Screener, which is kind of a joke because it's not quick. I'm like, who named this? This was not quick.
It depends on the kid.
Depends on the kid, yeah. All right. So this, you basically see what skill set you're testing at each one. Okay. And then the scores over here to the side. So he does, oh, he's a 5th grader. A lot of times I don't even give the 1, the 2, the 3. But he's doing pretty well. 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Uh-oh. 5 out of 10 on silent E. Question. Because we don't really get a whole big look into how he does. R controlled vowels. 5 out of 10 in nonsense words. He got 9 out of 10 out of real words. So, okay. He did pretty well here. He did well with vowel digraphs. He did well with prefixes. But at the bottom, on 3-syllable and 4-syllable words, does that match up with imbecile and astronids, and he can't break down multisyllabic words. So you see how we had to go a little bit deeper there? Because this didn't really tell us that, right? He just made so few errors, we didn't really know. So a phonics assessment can kind of take us there, right? So now what I want you to do, you've kind of seen what this kid can do. Talk with a partner and think about those 3 circles. We said he was kind of an early or transitional reader. If you were to make a list of what their needs are, What are his needs in word learning? What are his needs in comprehension? What are his needs in fluency? What should we teach him? Okay, talk at your table. Word learning, what would you say? Okay. What else? Anything else? I would put syllable patterns because it's in the Common Core for K through 3rd grade, but syllable patterns would be helpful to him. Okay. How about fluency? What's this kid's needs in fluency? What does he's a 2. What does the 2 say? Slow, so we need some pace or rate to increase. Anything else in that little number 2? Do we need any expression?
Yes.
Is that part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Which I would call prosody. Okay. Is there automaticity? Does he know words kind of on sight? Okay, that's hard to tell. Okay. How about comprehension and vocabulary? What are our needs here? I can't hear you.
Vocabulary.
Rereading for understanding, you need this word, that monitoring piece. Does it make sense?
What else? I hear people whispering.
I guess in graphic organizers is some other strategies to use.
Anything else? So, do we know what to teach him? We know what to teach him. The assessment told us that, right? So you have to say, you have to go back to your assessment list that you did at the very beginning of the session. Do you have the assessment that you need that can help you determine that? Okay? Because that's how you get good success with kids, is that you really are able to pinpoint and then you can match your instruction to those kids. So it's important that you have those particular pieces. And then what I do, so now once we've identified the needs, now we're going to go and say what strategies, what things can I use to teach this kid what he needs? What strategies, skills, activities. So you're going to see some things that are listed up here. Spot and dot is a strategy I use a lot to teach syllable patterns and teach multisyllabic words. That's a fun strategy. In comprehension, Reading Rockets had some great things to pull from, some great strategies. I'm sure your basal has great strategies that you're teaching in whole group, and then you have to say, what have I taught whole group that I can apply in a small group setting? Story maps, retelling ropes, inferential questioning. Here's my teaching map of what I need to teach this kid, right? So some of the work that we've done at other schools, then we take a look at the kids that are reading below grade level and we set goals. How are we going to help that kid get to those next levels that they need to get to? They need to get closer to grade level. So really focusing in, and you'll see that these little post-it notes all have little names on them. So the goal is P. That's our requirement by this portion of the school year that we're at with 3rd grade. And these are all the kids that are kind of not really where they need to be, but we could get them there if we really focused in. So when you're thinking about assessments, you want to think about use your screeners. And the kids that are reading above grade level, I'm not going to do this kind of intensive assessment with them. It's not as necessary because they're moving through the developmental cycle, okay? It's the kids that are below level that we need to dig deeper and be real focused. What is it? The upper kids, I can keep going with my curriculum and they're going to get a lot of stuff from just that. these are the kids that we really need to hone in and really need to know what it is that we're teaching and continually refocus. This activity we did during PLCs, and the teachers have continued doing it ever since we left because they liked it so much. It helped them. They only picked 3 or 4 kids to focus on, okay? It's overwhelming to think I have 27 first graders, and how am I gonna manage all that? You can't. But you could manage 4 or 5 that you're really intensely focused on for 3 or 4 weeks, and then maybe you shift to another 3 or 4. So try and think about it in smaller chunks. So the keys to success with this really are matching your instruction to development, teaching strategies, those strategy charts I showed you with scaffolding, providing scaffolding during lessons, making the kids do the work. Okay. Teaching for independence, can kids do that on their own without you? And then what kind of instruction have you inserted that supports low language or second language learners? So I kind of sense that you all are getting a little bit tired, so I think we need another break. Okay, I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to go get up, walk around, and then we'll come back together. And perception of the 2 boys who kind of perpetrated this crime. What's your perception of them? Loners. Crazy, a little crazy, yeah.
Like dark creative.
Dark, creative, smart.
Smart, but misunderstood. Not comfortable with their.
Would you be surprised to learn that these boys were really well liked? They had lots of friends. They worked at a pizza place, or one of them did, and they delivered the pizzas and stuff like that.
More friends.
So, even more, okay.
What was the title of it?
Columbine. So it's about the Columbine shooting that was in my high school.
Who wrote it?
This is by Dave Cullen. Okay. Cullen, The other thing that was interesting in this book that I learned is that when Columbine happened, there were certain protocols for police in a situation where there are hostages. Does anybody know what that protocol was back then? I'll tell you. If they do one of 2 things. If there's a passive gunman, that means they're not actually firing and they're not contacting the police and they're not doing anything. The police are real methodical and go through room by room to secure the building, which is what they did in Columbine. Or the second thing is, if there was an active shooter, they're supposed to kind of go towards the gunfire. But since there was no gunfire, they just kind of went methodically room by room. And because of that, a lot of people ended up dying. Well, not a lot, but a few people. There were some teachers and people that were wounded in the school that they couldn't rescue because it took them so long to get through. So because of what happened in Columbine, they've actually changed police procedures about how they deal with that. They actually tell them to go to the gunfire and just get the shooter down. So if you'd be interested, I think you'd like Columbine if you're interested in these same kind of topics and want to know more about who these boys were, you'd find out in this book. Just wanted to share you a little strategy calling Bless the Book, and that's what that strategy is. You just tell a little snippet, enough to interest somebody, and then you put it right up here on the chalk tray, and somebody's going to come get it. Right? Okay. And I have learned this out quite a few times, and it always makes its way back to me, but after I do that. So Bless the Book is one thing. If you do 1 book a day, how many books would you expose kids to?
166.
166 contact days that you have with kids. If kids bless their own books to small groups of kids every week, they might get excited about other books as well. Okay, so blessing the book is a real fun, kind of easy way to just highlight books. It doesn't take very much time. All right, we're halfway through with the content that we have, and we have a lot of work time left ahead of us. So the next piece that I want to go to is really just kind of looking at core instruction. How much time do you have, and what should be in it? And this was really a topic that came up at Junction on Monday, is that you're allocated time, but not feeling like you're real clear on where you want to go with that. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to take a minute to read the slide about core instruction. What would you highlight, underline? What words pop out at you as important when describing core instruction?
All students.
Take a minute to read it and identify those. Okay, you ready to give me some words to highlight?
Comprehensive. Small group.
Okay, where? Okay, I don't, what do you want me to underline? Whole and part? Is that, I heard both those words.
Part is to the left, part is
Okay.
Pre-teaching.
Any others? Okay, so here's what you said was important. This is just a description of what core instruction is, but what should it be? It's provided to all students, right? So that means you don't want pull-out times happening during core instruction. Because what happens is the kids who need the most get confused. Because they're kind of there some of the time and they're kind of there not the other part of the time. That's the hardest part, is the scheduling. To make sure that they're not leaving for ESL, for SPED, or any other pullouts that kids are doing, right? Okay. It's guided by a comprehensive core reading program. Do you have that? Okay. But guided is a key word, right? So my understanding is last year you really tried to implement the program with fidelity, which is a good idea. Because now you know what's in it and kind of how it works before you start picking and choosing what you want to use, okay? So now you're at a place where there's encouragement of, let's really use this resource the best way possible, right? So now we're really in that guided phase of like, it's not required. Well, first of all, you can't do everything in a core program because there's not enough time in the day, unless you sleep. But hopefully you don't. Just feels like it. All right, so you've got a core program. Do you have whole and part? Do you have whole class time? Do you have part or small group time during that core instruction? Okay, so that should be there. There's a differentiation time. That's probably your small group time, where you're pulling small groups that have like needs, and then you're teaching to those needs, right? There's reteaching and needs. Is there anything else that you feel like needed to be underlined there for us to understand what should be in core instruction? Okay, so we got a picture. Let's go a little bit deeper. What's the what? That's the structure, but what's in it? All this stuff. All those reading components are in it. That's all the stuff in the core. Motivation. Bless the Book is a motivation strategy. It gets kids excited about reading. It motivates them to go up and get the book off the chalk tray and read it. Real simple to do. There's other motivation strategies.
Is motivation new? Because when I was in school, that wasn't a component.
Motivation was not part of the National Reading Panel in 2000 and kind of got lost. So it's always been there. Motivation's always should be what you want to occur. My son, who's a 3rd grader, is a reluctant reader, right? I think I told Junction this before. It's kind of God's little joke on me. I'm a reading specialist and I got a kid that doesn't want to read. Super! So I get to put every strategy I have under the sun to try and figure out how to get him excited about reading. That's our job as teachers, right? How do we make kids love to read instead of the drudgery of that? I'll tell you one thing that doesn't is the weekly basal reader test that is 10 pages long. My son's concept of reading is every Friday I take that test, and in 2nd grade, if you didn't do well on it, you got it back on Monday and you had to correct it. So that really can kill a lot of motivation. So think about that. I know it comes with the program, but think at it from the kid perspective. And from the parent in your classroom who's a reading specialist that sees it coming home and who's now complained to the principal about why do I see 10 pages of a test coming home when my kid's in 2nd grade. This is what he thinks reading is. I read the same story for a week, and on Friday I have to take 10-page test on it, and if I don't do okay, I get it back and I get it corrected. He's not, the only thing he's learning is that reading sucks. So, yeah. Motivation. And then the big 5. Phonological, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And then we're going to adjust the time we spend on that based on our stages of reader development, right? I'm not going to spend as much time on word learning in the intermediate grades because they don't need it as much. I'm going to spend more time on word learning in primary. And then we've got these structures that we can use, the balanced literacy components. We can do read alouds. We can do shared reading with kids, guided reading or small group differentiated reading, and independent reading. And then we can also use writing with that. I like to think the good thing about Common Core is if you can think about a triangle. Every time I plan instruction, I want kids to read, talk, and write. Read, talk, write, read, talk, write, every lesson. So that they're getting all of those key components of Common Core. So those are some of the structures, all right? So if I'm to go into and think about, and this is kind of what Junction asked me on Monday, what's the core instruction supposed to look like? Some school districts define it for you. Like you will do this many minutes of this many minutes of this many minutes of that. Is that true in Turner?
Not specific, within that number of minutes.
Okay, so you have a big block. You have 120 minutes in Turner, right? Okay. Because the example I used was 90. All right? So I use 90 minutes. Some people have 90-minute blocks. So I use that as an example. Now, if I have 90 minutes, I know I have to have whole group, I have to have small group. And I usually see about 3 groups a day, right? And I know my lessons need to be as close to 20 minutes as I can, because you can't really accomplish anything in 8 minutes or 10 minutes. If I used to have 30 back in the day, we used to prescribe 30, but everywhere I go, nobody's like, we can't fit that in. I'm like, okay. So I want to get as close to 20 minutes as I can with a small group, okay? So that's about an hour of my 90 minutes is gone, right? 60 minutes is gone. So I have about 30 minutes left. That's going to be my whole group time. So I'm going to do whole group. So if I look at my example, right? I took out my 60 minutes for small groups. So I'm going to spend about 18 minutes in each group, if the world's perfect, and 2 minutes transition time, okay? I'm going to have to plan for fluency to happen some other time than my small group time, because 18 minutes doesn't really allow me much time, so I'm either going to have to weave that into whole group, or what kids do away from me. So maybe paired reading, independent reading somehow, okay? So I've got about 36 minutes for independent work. That means when kids are away from me, what's the absolute best thing that can happen when they're away from me? I want it to be quality. And I want it to be easy to manage. You know what the easiest thing is to manage? Go read. Okay? Go read. Train them how to read. Anybody in here do the daily 5? Okay. Have kids build that stamina, that reading stamina. Train them how to have stamina. What does it feel like? Monitored independent reading is the easiest thing to have them do. I don't have to run off worksheets. I don't have to plan it. I just have to train them how to do it and then conference with them every once in a while about what it is that they're reading. The other thing I want them to do is I want them to write in response to reading. So whatever I do at the small group table, I want them to go away and I want them to write about it. Either just a response about how they feel about that. If you were that character, what would you do? A 2-column chart. There's lots of great resources that can help provide structures for that. But I want kids reading and writing when they're away from me. If you're lucky enough to have technology, you could weave that in. I didn't put it as one of the options here, but you certainly could because you have Success Maker that everybody uses, and so that's one of the things you can put in yours. So then 30 minutes, that leaves me 30 minutes. That's not very much time. And when I tried to digest that big bad basil you have, whoa, that would take a lot of time. That means I'm going to have to be selective because I only have 30 minutes. So reader development, assessment, what do my kids need? Now I'm going to look at the materials, and I'm already going to do some stuff like this. I'm going to do some reading, writing, speaking, and listening things. Okay? Just phonics as needed, phonological awareness, because maybe I'm in an intermediate grade. But I'm going to have to make some real decisions about what I'm doing in that 30 minutes. Because that's not very much time, is it? Okay. This doesn't address writing at all. My writing probably occurs at a second time during that day if I only have a 90-minute time. You guys have 120. So is that supposed to include writing instruction as well as reading?
Yeah.
Okay. So your job is to create your own core right now. Okay. What we're going to ask you to do, you're going to have the number of minutes at the top, 120. Okay. You can work in grade level teams. You can work by yourself, however you want to do that. So if you have 120 minutes, here's what you need to do. What content do I have to teach? Reading, writing, speaking, listening, language, does all of that go in there? Mine was just reading. Reading and speaking and listening and language. Writing wasn't part of mine at 90 minutes. You have writing too, okay? How many minutes are you going to give for the core or the whole group and small group? And then what's included in each one? Sometimes you have to get creative and you have to say, well, I'm going to have to alternate days. I have 5 guided reading groups. I'm going to see groups A, B, and C 4 days, group D and E on Tuesdays and Thursdays or something like that. You have to think through that. Or can you alternate the time frames for the reading components? So maybe you're going to do what part of reading that you're going to do that day. So what I'm going to, I think there's some poster paper maybe back there behind Joy. I'm going to ask you to create, and there's a whole bunch of markers, and maybe you want to spread out. There's some really nice spaces over here in this library. Maybe you want to spread out with some of your friends. You guys decide. But I'm going to give you about 15 minutes, maybe 10. We'll check in and see how you are. About 10 minutes to create your own core. Okay? Revisit it, see where you're at. Are you getting everything in? Whole group and some small group instructions. Here's the what as part of that, right? Reading components. And then we've got some structures we teach with. Then we have choices how we want to do that. And so then you took the time frame that you had and you said, let's revisit. What is this? It's really how you define it. And you know what? The great thing is your district just said X number of minutes. Sometimes districts will say you have to do a 20-minute read aloud, then you have to do this, then you have to do this, then you have to do this. You have some flexibility here because you have a time frame to teach it, and that time frame can flex. What if you're in the middle of a writing genre and you're getting ready to publish a paper? You might need to spend more of your core instruction in that publishing phase of writing. You have the ability to flex that, right? Okay. So, but it's yours to decide how you accomplish that particular for instruction. And now you have some materials. So let's go into the materials that you talked about, okay? I'm gonna have to abandon this activity because we don't have a lot of time, and I wanna make sure I'm gonna give you more time to look in your, but I want you to look and identify this article in the Google Drive that you have. This is a great article on how to use basal readers effectively. We're gonna read it in here and, you know, chew on it and stuff like that, but we don't have time to. Let me give you a short synopsis of what it says. It basically says that basal readers are very comprehensive, and it's very difficult to teach everything that's in the basal reader, and that you have to make decisions on what you're going to teach. Okay? So I am freeing you from the chains of that you have to teach everything in the basal. And by the way, you can't, because there's not enough time in the day. Okay? So, but read that article. Get a few minutes. If you're stuck in a practice and you don't have anything else to do, go to your Google Drive. Okay, so here's what we're going to do next. I am going to unpack my thinking about your basic. Okay? And you're going to get to observe that. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to do that to the next kind of unit that you're looking at as well. All right? So, what I did is I selected 3rd grade, since I have preschool to 5th in here, so I selected 3rd grade, and I went to this little camel guy. This is Unit 3 though, I think, right? Have you already taught Unit 3? Yeah. Okay, 3rd grade's already taught Unit 3. Okay, so this is what I did. I went to the, oh no, I gotta go to the other piece.
Sorry.
I should have taken grade 4. That's what you're going to do in a few minutes. Okay, so I think the best place to start in the unit is the whole unit overview. So I went to the unit overview and I started looking across all of the weeks. And I started to look and say, what are the similarities? What am I teaching in this unit? So I started to see, and okay, and then I like had to make some decisions. Do you remember my reading block or my core instruction time is 90 minutes? So that means I'm not teaching writing now, I'm teaching a different part of the day. So when I look at this language arts parts, I'm going to teach this during my writing, probably when I do my revision and my proofreading. Okay? So I'm just removing this from my equation because I have a writing time and I'm teaching it during writing, not during my 90-minute block. Okay? That may be different for you because you have 120 minutes. But I didn't really look at this because my belief is language arts and stuffs like sentence fluency, word choice, tense of verbs is all best done in writing. And it should be couched in the real authentic thing that you do and not happen outside of and done on a worksheet because it doesn't stick with kids that way. So I would do it in mini lessons during my writer's workshop time, and I would teach it in probably the revision and the publishing stage is when I would do that. So that kind of removes some of the language arts for me. You may still have to deal with that. But I would say integrate. And what I know about basal readers, they don't put as much effort in this section as they do this section. That means it's less developed and there's a lot of worksheets.
Wonders is pretty. Did
Okay.
you glance at that one? Because it has a lot.
Good.
It's very comprehensive.
Good. So,
But there are a lot of worksheets.
So
there are
use that
worksheets
as-
in grammar.
right.
But the
Just
writing.
remember and go back to how do you learn? Right? And what's authentic? So I just like to try and couch it in kind of real reading and writing anytime I can. Computers get it. Okay, so I looked across it and I started to see some things that emerged. Visualization's one. I've got some summary. I think folk tales started to emerge. So as I kind of looked across the unit and the different weeks, okay? Now, this is 3rd grade. I've got phonics. Do I want to teach my whole class R control? I don't know. How many kids are reading at above grade level? How many kids are early readers versus transitional readers? If I have mostly transitional readers, I'm probably going to do this in small group. Because transitional readers don't need to know AR, ER, IR. If I have a lot of early readers, I might do a whole group. So see how my stages of reader development come into play here? Okay. My fluency, if I do something, I'll have to see how I can kind of work that in. Vocabulary, these are all narrative stories. So there's really not anything. Here's a informational kind of content words, right? Then as I look at the next section here, prefixes, diphthongs, sequence. Now I've got some expository text coming in, okay? Note-taking, skimming and scanning, okay? Now if I go and I move to the first week, so I'm kind of trying to get a sense. I've got the unit plan. Now if I look by day, I've got folktale on this day, visualization, okay, synonyms, visualization, folktale. I'm just going to look in the whole group part, okay. Okay, back to my day 3, phonics and fluency. This Martina, a beautiful cockroach, I think that's a folktale too, okay. Research, get a backbone. Now I got an informational text, so I got two narratives that are folk tales, and I got an informational text. Okay. 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 So I'm kind of getting a sense. So this is what I'm thinking. Now I'm not really looking at the small group differentiated stuff yet. I'm just trying to figure out what am I going to teach whole group. Because really differentiated gets into a whole, that's a whole nother, we're going to focus just on whole group, okay? So let's go back to, so what I'm starting to think about now is what am I teaching? This is what I kind of got when I looked through all those pages. In week 1, they talk about this whole theme is being unique. That's good. Themes are good. ESOL and low language, themes and vocabulary that we can all tie together, that we can go back to over and over again, those are really good things. So I'm like, huh. But when I looked at the activity, I was like, this is a terrible activity. I never do that for teaching unique. So I'm going to maybe abandon that. I'm going to go find something else. Maybe I can find a poem, I can find a video, we can do a semantic feature analysis of how we're all unique, how we look, and what we do. The literature in this week is folktales, and there's multiple texts we can use. So I can teach determining importance of what is a folktale, what are the characteristics of it, and what is important in that folktale. Story elements, because it's narrative. Visualization and vocabulary were already there for me, right? Then there's an informational text to get a backbone. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I kind of like compare and contrast, but I'm not sure I really like what was in there and what they asked me to do. And then the phonics small group, I was like, maybe the small group because we're in 3rd grade. That depends on who your kids are, right? Okay. So this is what I kind of extracted. Now, how am I going to teach it? Okay. The book tells me to teach it one way, but anybody who knows me knows I'd never do it the way this book asks me to do it. Okay. Because I'm like, and by the way, it's kind of confusing. It's just like overwhelming. It's like an ocean going over you, all those pages. I'm just like, oh. That's why I just like, what is in here? What is in here? Okay. So I decided on day 1 what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this whole introduction of the concept of being unique. I'm going to do an activity about that. So we start to kind of get that idea going, because the whole week, all the stories are about the animals are unique in some way. I'm like, this is awesome. I can like carry that out. The kids are really going to know what unique means by the end of the week. So I'm going to do some sort of activity, and then I'm going to do I'm going to do a mini lesson on visualization. And I'm going to use Tammy McGregor's Comprehension Connections book for that. She's got an activity on how to teach with a toilet paper roll. Okay? So she talks about like looking through a kaleidoscope and look through the little small like toilet paper roll, and you see how you just like zoom in and you can see that picture. So she's got a little activity for how to teach visualization. I'm going to do that, okay? And then maybe we can draw some pictures or do something with that. And then we're going to read that bear, beaver, and bee section, because that's a really nice way of teaching uniqueness as well as visualization. So it all fits, and that's the first reading. So that's going to be my day one. And that's all I'm going to do because I only have 30 minutes. I hope I can get that done in 30 minutes. That's a lot. Day two, come back to the theme. Unique and visualization. Now I'm going to teach folk tales. What are folk tales? What are the key aspects of a folk tale? Is this book a folk tale? Is this story a folk tale? How do we know? Okay. Probably going to create an anchor chart that I can come back to over and over again. Okay? So that the kids can use that as a resource. I'm going to teach the vocabulary that goes with that folk tale, because vocabulary is what we need to teach at all levels. You don't want to leave that out, and it's already laid out for you in the curriculum. I don't want to go do any more work on it. I don't have to, right? It's already there. Cycle course. Then we're going to read this text, the shared reading of Edgeworth's Tale, and I'm going to reinforce visualization. I'm going to bring that back from day one. And we're going to do some things with that. I'm going to ask the kids to actually identify the elements of a folk tale and maybe do a graphic organizer of Edgeworth's Tale with visualization, where they might draw a picture of three areas where they created some pictures in their head. None of this matches what says on day one. None of it. But I pulled the things that I thought were really good. And how, now I'm driving the bus. That thing's not driving the bus, but it's providing me everything I need. I've got the story, I've got the vocabulary terms, I've got the strategies, everything's sequenced for me, right? Now, if I read those stories and I thought, thumbs down on the strategy. Are you pointing at me? No. Okay, so sorry. I can't see back there, so I can see up close, I can't see far away, I can't ever see. So so if I don't like the stories, I might replace it, because I think, I like the story, I like this story better.
So when you're doing the shared read on day two,
Yep.
is that you reading to them, you reading together?
Well, since it's a shared reading, that means they're going to have their books, and it's going to be probably projected on the wall, and I'm going to be able to make choices, right? I'm probably not going to do popcorn reading, because that gives lots of kids anxiety, and I don't want that going on. Right? But probably I would read it aloud to you, and they can follow along. Or on audio. What other options? Okay, and just a little side note. You guys know Wonders way better than I do. All right? So I don't know all the things you have available to you to use that are in there. You'll let me know. Okay, so day 3, I'm going to review visualization and folk tales. So I'm going to start again. And then I'm going to teach or reteach the story elements. We're already into December, probably is maybe when you taught this. So you've probably already taught story elements once. So maybe I'm going to bring that anchor chart back. Or we're going to go and just do a quick review again about what are the story elements in narrative text, right? And these are present in folk tales as well. Vocabulary, okay? Now we're going to reread the Inchworm tale. The way they had that set up, it was like you read like 3 texts in one day, and then I was like, I need more time with this text. I'm going to come back to this text again and use it, because it's going to take me time to read it. So one day we're going to read it, then the next day I want to come back and I want to do some stuff with it. So I switched that up. I wanted a couple days with that book. And then we're going to do some stuff with story elements. Maybe do a story map where we can fill that out. We could do some writing with that. And the story has unique animals. The inchworm is unique. So now we can tie that back into that whole theme. Day 4, see my theme continues through vocabulary. There's a third story, so it's a full tale. It has story. We can really teach deeply through this whole week if we stay focused on that. Okay? I still have my same pieces. Story elements, graphic organizer. We can write a summary using the graphic organizer. I can teach them how to write a summary to do that. Again, back to this idea of unique. And day 5, I'm not going to give that 10-page test. Please don't do that to my son. Okay? Think of another way that takes less time and that they can show you that they understand. Because it really does kill the love. So, I probably can assess vocabulary. I'd look and see how it's assessed in the, maybe you can use, maybe just that part of it. I don't need to do the whole assessment, right? And do you have to assess every kid every week on every text they read? Do you do that in real life? What do you do when you read books?
Enjoy them.
Talk about them. You talk to other people about them, don't you? You don't write a book report. You don't have to do a test. I mean, you still have to test kids, but does it have to be that test? And how does that work? And I'm hearing a lot of concern about how much assessment you have to do. Okay? I know you're still accountable to the grade book, right? So how does that work?
And the state assessment, that's what I was thinking with vocabulary. Should we focus our assessment on vocabulary more on using context clues and not just the memorization of the vocabulary for that week? Or is it a hybrid? Because when we test the state assessment, it's how do you use these context clues or how do you use these synonyms and antonyms to help me figure out this unknown word? So it's more like cold stuff. I just want to throw that out there. I don't.
I like how you asked that question.
With my face, yes, thank you.
It's important to teach kids to use context. You have to be careful with context. Because sometimes context isn't there. We say use the context clues and there are no context clues. So now what do we do?
Right.
But it's really good if they're doing that on the assessment that you do that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay? So I like that. And we have to continue to teach vocabulary. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of to piggyback off that, we had a really good conversation with some of the 2nd grade and 3rd grade teachers. We do assess a lot. We don't do the full assessment. We either do one selection story or cold. We always do cold reads, and that's going to lead to. So we either do one cold read because there's always 2 cold read stories, and then the multiple choice, or we do like both passages they have to read, and then we do this question 21, which is basically comparing, contrasting the 2 stories, that kind of thing. So we've cut it that way at least, but we still assess a lot. But the question that we were talking about in our particular group was, and this kind of piggybacks off what Leisha was saying, we've been using the cold reads because you're applying what you know to something you've never seen, which is preparing them for the state assessments, etc. But when we're talking vocabulary, etc., I mean, the selection test is going to be the one that essentially test those specific skills we've been focusing on all week. So should we maybe alternate and do some selection tests for a couple weeks? And we're teaching, the kids are familiar with that content, they're going to get better at test taking and test taking strategies, and then throw in a cold read, or I don't know what your recommendation would be on that. Do you understand the not?
I heard a lot of great thinking in all of that.
I know it's a jumbled mess, but I appreciate the great.
But here's, that's not me, is it?
No,
okay, that's
when kids get out of school.
Sorry, you don't get out.
Not to
Okay,
mention,
so
go back up what that is a familiar read. It's also going to add some confidence and some success to the students if they're reading something that they've already been familiar with.
The most important things I heard were that you used your resource was there, but you didn't just pull it and say, I'm just going to do this because it's the end of the unit, it's the end of the week, and I'm just giving this assessment. That's the wrong answer. The right answer is you were very thoughtful, and you said, we want to do this because of this, and this is what our kids need. That's what I'd like to hear. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what the right way is to do it. what I heard you say is that there were a lot of people putting good thought into what I do and using things that you've already been provided so you don't have to go create something completely new, right? Because I live in the real world, you don't have time to do all that. But make good choices about the things that are there, and if there's something that's not there that you need, then you create it.
We are like,
Right.
I was just gonna say we have it, I mean, but then we're experiencing students that are having a lot of frustration.
And our
on
scores
those assessments, and
ultimately,
our
how
scores
many
are
kids
shot.
are in the needs improvement versus being proficient or not.
So I think
Our
that goes
scores
back to the kids, you know, we have a lot of ELL students, or they're not having the background knowledge, they're not having the vocabulary.
But I think it's also what are we doing with the data?
Right. Well, if they keep failing the test, then the test isn't working. I mean, just, and then you also have other assessments that you're using as measures too.
Right,
So,
right.
Something we say a lot in our discussions, Joy and Jill said it, but I don't know what her exact words were. We do this so they'll be ready for the test. So that's not, we're not doing this to build a reader.
Right.
We're doing this to build someone. So to me, if our reason for taking a test every week is to get ready for some big test, I'm not making a reader.
so how much, so we have to
And if our
balance
scores
it.
aren't changing,
Yeah.
and if our scores aren't changing,
Yeah.
Because
we're
we're not
assessing the
making
same.
readers.
Absolutely.
That's why our
So
scores don't, in my opinion.
No,
We're not making readers, then we're not passing the test.
Okay, so here is the conundrum, right? And how do we figure out what that balance is? Because in the world, like, let's just say you're a stockholder in a business. If your business doesn't make money and your stocks don't go up, you're mad, right? So the business has to do something to figure out how to make the stock go up so the stockholders are happy. We're in the same business in schools, right? We're here to create a love of reading, but we're here to be held accountable to, we're making sure then providing what it is that kids need to do. So we have to create readers, but we also have to create kids that can show what they know, right? And that's the rub. How do you do that? And nobody has the magic formula, but maybe Turner. Yes, we can do this. All right? Okay. There's a lot of good thinking in this place. Okay? You kind of see where I'm going with this? With wonders? Okay? On day 5, I don't want to spend all my time testing. I know I have a grade card. I know we have to take the state assessment. But I want to really teach this good. I want to teach folk tales. I want to teach story elements. I want to teach visualization. And I want to make sure we have enough time to practice it. And then I can just do a quick dip. How do we do on vocabulary? And then they have those writing projects at the end. I was like, oh, writing. I like this idea. Here's a couple options. Write a summary or write an analysis of a text. Could I grade that instead of giving them the 10-page test? I could grade that. I could have a rubric and we could say, right? And then don't do that. Or what weekly assessment, I guess, is what that is. Okay? And then I'd have to scaffold the kids through that writing process. Or maybe I connect it to my writer's workshop time or whatever. What I created in 5 days did not come from there, except for a few things. I pulled the things I thought were the most crucial, and then I said, I have this time frame. What can I teach and teach well in the time frame that I have? And that's how I came to those items, right? When I was looking at this whole week. And see, as a teacher, I'm real focused. I'm teaching this. I'm not gonna get sidetracked by all this stuff around it. I'm teaching this. And there might be stuff in there that can help me, but there might be stuff in other places I need to go to that can help me, right? So I kind of have some of my go-tos that I can use for materials, right? If I want to teach comprehension strategies, I can go to resources like these. If I'm doing informational text and text structures, I can go here. If I need sentence frames for my English language learners, I can go here. If I need some mini lessons on bulk tales, maybe I can go to this book. Or if I need some help on how to teach visualization or some fluency activities, I can go to my teacher resources and then I can pull some of those ideas that are there. So That's how I think I would use the basal most effectively, is that I would just really, I'm gonna look at what's there, and then I'm gonna really laser-like focus what I'm gonna do. Turn and say something to your neighbor about what you're thinking. That wasn't very long because I want to set you off to work. Oh, good, you have a lot to say. Now, remember what I said about those school districts that don't have any basal? So they don't have stories already selected, comprehension strategies woven in, vocabulary already there. You have that. And you have the ability to pick and choose what you feel like your kids need. Okay? So here's your task. You brought your Wonders Manual with you, hopefully. Read through the week of lessons and stories. I don't care if it's next week, I don't care if it's the next unit, whatever you want to do, okay? But identify what are the big ideas that you're teaching. And the goals for the week. Think about what your kids need. And what parts in that basal meet their needs and what parts don't, because you might have to go get some things. And now start to create that, what am I going to teach on day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of that week. Okay? So you're going to have about 20 minutes to do that, work, get started, and then we'll come back. Okay? Looking for assessment and reading. And then we talked about how the stages of reader development, combining those two things really tells us as teachers what we're supposed to teach, right? Along with Common Core. And then we really define what is core instruction. And you created what is your core instruction going to look like, right? You got the 90 minutes that the district says do, or 120 do it in, but you have some autonomy there to use the materials you have and create that core instruction that fulfills the criteria that we talked about. It's whole group, it's small group, it's all kids, it's differentiated. It includes the core components of reading. It has structures in it for balanced literacy. All of those key pieces. And then I unpacked Wonders as best I could. Okay, I don't live and breathe it like you guys do, so I don't know it as well as you do. But just unpack some of my thinking about how I might use it so that that could spur some of your thinking. So that when you go back to use this resource again, how are you going to pick the most effective things to use out of it, and your students will really benefit from that. We didn't get to the last part, the language strategies, but the good news is I'm coming back. I think the week after, the day after spring break, right? Yeah. I'm going to kick you off into the last quarter of the year. And for Junction folks, I'll be coming a couple more times to meet with you and we'll work a little bit more deeply. So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to think, what are the top 3 things you want to take away from today? Turn and whisper to your neighbor what those are. Okay, so I've really enjoyed today. Thank you so much. You were great participants.